Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. Got another Master Duel video for you. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of theory crafting post-ban list. We're going to be taking a look at KASHTIRA FENRIR, a card that pretty soon here we'll be going from 1 copies to 3, and it's made quite a commotion within the Master Duel community. Some people are really looking forward to this as an optional engine for certain decks or for boosting the viability of decks that already want to play Fenrir, and others are kind of decrying it as a bit of a mistake that KASHTIRA is a deck that should remain limited. So today we're going to be taking a look at 4 different deck builds that we're going to be seeing, or at least that I'm going to be trying, once Fenrir goes from 1 to 3 on May 7th, which should be in like a little bit over a week, I believe, at the time this video is going out. So we're going to dive right on into it. Before we do, though, first got to give a huge thanks up top to our YouTube members and Patreon subscribers. Could not do the daily uploads for Master Duel content without your support. If you want to see YouTube content early, sometimes even up to a week early, but at least a few days, then you can go ahead and join as a YouTube member next to the subscribe button below. If you're looking for content that isn't on YouTube, that's entirely exclusive, head over to patreon.com/hexlex. There we cover new card reveals, like from the OCG as they're coming out. I show extra replays I don't have the time to share here on YouTube. We look at duel lives, we look at meta breakdowns, so on and so forth. Anyway, let's go ahead and get right on into decks that really want to utilize KASHTIRA FENRIR moving forward, starting with KASHTIRA itself. So this will be the first of the deck lists that we're going to be taking a look at. And I gotta be completely honest with you, this of the 4 decks we're going to look at today was actually one of the more difficult ones for me to put together. It's been a bit since I've played KASHTIRA, both with and against, honestly. I haven't seen a lot of KASHTIRA around, so I did a little bit of digging both through some of my older videos and some more recent deck lists to try to get a grasp of how I would want to build the deck with 3 Fenrir. Now, even though this is a KASHTIRA monster, it's not actually a great starter for the KASHTIRA deck. You'd really rather see Unicorn, which is of course semi-limited, but I'm in unlimited deck building mode to include 3 copies of Fenrir. But Unicorn is semi-limited, and this card can grab KASHTIRA Theosis, which then summons Fenrir, and that's like a full combo that can end on Era plus the Arise Heart. But Fenrir, on the other hand, like, yeah, I could search Unicorn, but unless you already have a Birth in your hand, then you're not going to be able to summon that Unicorn that you searched up. So honestly, Fenrir is kind of a better extender for the deck than it is an actual starter. Now, granted, it's not like the deck doesn't really care that Fenrir is at 3. It is a pretty huge buff. One of the biggest ways that I think this is a buff for KASHTIRA, and one of, I think, the better applications for Fenrir in general, is actually going second. You can special summon this right off the bat going into your opponent's board, and then if they start to try to use their end board pieces to play on your turn or negate your plays, you could start threatening to banish their monsters with KASHTIRA FENRIR. A lot of people are really not happy about the fact that this card can add more copies of itself, but I think even, especially in a deck like KASHTIRA itself, that's not really very relevant. It's a lot more relevant as an outside engine, but again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think a lot of people are kind of sleeping on how good of a going second card Fenrir is. Again, not just for KASHTIRA, but for any deck in general. Speaking of going second cards, we were rocking a playset of Super Polymerization in this KASHTIRA deck to help us go second, which this deck can kind of struggle a little bit with. And also, Super Poly is a really great tech in the current meta. Of course, against Cool Tuned, you can make the Sea Monster of Theseus, which right off the bat, that is a great way to clean up your opponent's board. And even if your opponent sees that you have Super Poly in your hand with their Cool Tune Rotary, even if they try to play around it, like, what are they going to do? Only have 1 monster on the field at a time? Cool Tune really can't get away with that. Not for very long, anyway. So I really like having the Super Polymerizations in a build like this, plus we really have the extra deck space for it. This was actually one of the more difficult aspects of building a KASHTIRA deck for me, was filling out the extra deck. It's kind of one of the reasons I'm even playing Super Poly in the first place. Like, if I owned a 3rd Arise Heart, I would definitely be on that, and then I might be more willing to replace one of these Desires with an Extravagance, but I really don't think it makes that much of a difference. I think Desires is fine here because as far as like our engine stuff goes, now that Fenrir is at 3, we're playing multiple copies of all of the really, really important stuff, right? But I think more than that, this deck actually desperately needs a card like Desires or Pot of Extravagance Prosperity was the big one. Prosperity was so good for KASHTIRA before it got banned, but Prosperity is also way good for way too many decks, which is why it got banned. But my point here is that KASHTIRA is really in desperate need of this consistency buff. And that's why I think even with Fenrir at 3, KASHTIRA is going to still maintain its rogue status. I think I might make a tier list and go a little bit more in depth on that here in maybe a couple of days, or just, I guess, depending on the order of when these videos go out, maybe even tomorrow. Or if you're a member, maybe you're even watching that video right now. Well, no, you're watching this video right now. Anyway, my point being, I think that KASHTIRA is going to remain a rogue tier deck, even with Fenrir at 3, because Fenrir at 3 doesn't really solve KASHTIRA's two major issues, which are its consistency and its power in its end board, which consistency and power are kind of the two deciding factors for literally every deck. So already talked about consistency a little bit, right? Unicorn's still at 2, but even if this was at 3, your starters in this deck are Unicorn, the field spell Right South, which is still very much limited, and then Planet Pathfinder, which you kind of have to rock a playset of just to be able to find your field spell. And that's kind of it. So we're looking at, what, 7 starters? For 2026 Yu-Gi-Oh!, that is not really that good, like, at all. A few years ago, you know, that was a little bit more acceptable, but, like, nowadays, no. That's not gonna cut it when I'm looking at 12 for, like, any tier 2 or higher deck as the minimum amount of 1-card starters that I'm looking to have, right? So already we're having a huge consistency issue, which again is why we're rocking Pot of Desires, or again Extrav if you're on 3 Arise Heart. But the other issue, as mentioned before, is the power of the end board. Like, even if you're able to end on Shangri-Ira and Arise Heart and Fenrir and Unicorn, like, that's a really, really solid end board, right? But the problem is that your board doesn't have any kind of inherent protection or negates. Ira can protect itself with its last effect, but if your opponent drops like a Raigeki as just extremely baseline, right? You've got this board of, again, Fenrir, Unicorn, Arise Heart, and Ira. If the first thing your opponent does is Raigeki, you lose everything but the Ira, and all of a sudden you're in a losing position. And it's not just that, of course. There are any number of board breakers that would completely dismantle a KASHTIRA board in seconds. So, I don't think this deck is bad, but I can't really see it being a tiered threat, even with Fenrir at 3. I just don't think it has the enough ways to set up its end board, and even if you set up the ideal end board, I think it's way too easy to out, especially in 2026 Yu-Gi-Oh! Now granted, Fenrir to 3 is still a huge buff for the KASHTIRA deck, but moving forward, like I said, I think this will remain a rogue tier deck. So keeping within the realm of the Visas Starfrost lore, the next deck that we're going to be looking at that's rocking a playset of Fenrir is actually Scareclaw, a deck I really, really like, but haven't really played in a while. And I think that Fenrir coming to 3 copies in Master Duel is actually one of the perfect excuses to look at this deck yet again. Scareclaw is definitely power crept in the modern meta, not going to deny that at all. But the Fenrir to 3 is actually a pretty significant buff, especially for Fenrir's role as an extender, or even part of a 2-card combo as a starter. If you were to open KASHTIRA Fenrir plus one of your Ghost Girls, right, Ash Blossom or Ghost Spell, you could special summon Fenrir, use the effect to add Scareclaw KASHTIRA, normal summon your Ghost Girl, tune them into Baron de Fleur. Now you can activate Scareclaw KASHTIRA, banishing the Fenrir from your graveyard to special summon, turn that into Scareclaw Lightheart, that grabs your field spell, and now you can start looking at making some Scareclaw plays off of the Fenrir plus a hand trap. And I think there's a lot of potential in that, but even outside of that, Fenrir is just a great body to have on board for a deck like this, which really needs some help on its end board. I think that's one of the reasons why Scareclaw is kind of weaker right now and a little bit power crept, is that, you know, when you think about a typical Scareclaw end board of Tri-Heart plus a bunch of Scareclaw monsters, you know, that's really not that big of a deal in 2026 Yu-Gi-Oh! It's also one of the reasons why we're playing Fiendsmith in this build. I guess this should technically then be Fiendsmith Scareclaw, but But yeah, no, that's also why we're playing the Fiendsmith engine here, right? Is to be able to add the Caesar and give our end board a little bit more of an oomph. And so not only can Fenrir potentially go into the Baron de Fleur, making that a lot easier to do in this deck, and even in turn setting up some plays in certain situations, but you could also just begin by special summoning Fenrir and just leaving it out there, going through to your opponent's turn. And in a deck like this, I think that's completely fine. In the average Yu-Gi-Oh deck, especially like a tier 2 or higher deck, I don't know if you could really get away with that, right? Like, yeah, Fenrir is technically splashable at 3 in any Yu-Gi-Oh deck, and you could make the same arguments that I have, right? Going first, you can just special this, have it on your board, and then have it up there through your opponent's turn. Going second, you can begin by special summoning this, and then it becomes more difficult for your opponent to play. However, it's really, really easy to say that, but then you look at a lot of meta decks right now, and they really just do not have the room to be playing 3 Fenrir. And even if they could afford the room, they definitely have better things to play. Like, all of the arguments that you're making for Fenrir, I guess that I'm making in this case, for going first or second, you could apply to, like, literally any hand trap also being good going first or second for the same reasons, right? And when you think about it that way, it becomes like a lot easier to see why I don't think 3 Fenrir is going to be showing up in every single deck. But again, a deck like Scareclaw, where it does have a specific function of grabbing the Scareclaw KASHTIRA and enabling more negates on your end board in, again, scenarios where you might not normally have plays, I think that has a lot of potential value. You could even go well beyond what I have the scope of this Scareclaw build. You could bump it more up to like 50 or even 60 cards, including more of the VODS lore archetypes, like more KASHTIRA cards. You could be playing Unicorn and Birth. You could throw in some Monadium stuff. There's all of the different cards that supports the, if I can spell right, the VODS Starfrost. The Samsara, I was trying to remember the name of this one in particular. Level 4 tuner is not bad to have to further expand your end board options. So yeah, there's a ton of different ways that you can incorporate all different archetypes from the lore into this one deck. And again, I think having 3 Fenrir really helps that, even to just make our baseline strategy a lot more consistent. However, I do think that there is one of the tier 1 decks out there that you could slot a playset of Fenrir into a lot more easily than others, and that's going to be K9 Vanquish Soul. It's no surprise that the KASHTIRA Fenrir would have a home here, being Earth attribute. Of course, the Vanquish Soul cards really care about having fire, earth, and dark monsters, and so Fenrir seems to, again, pretty naturally slot in. At a glance, however, one argument I would really make against KASHTIRA Fenrir in a deck like this actually lies in the same reason why you might argue for it, and that is its attribute. While the Vanquish Soul archetype does care about the Earth attribute, it cares about having a balance of all 3. You're going to need fire to activate some of your best effects. For example, the Holly Sue special summon from deck effect, or the Raisin destroying monsters in its card's column effect, or even Caesar Valius needing all 3 attributes in order to be able to destroy a card. So, when you are jamming a playset of KASHTIRA Fenrir into a deck like this, it's eating slots that fire monsters would normally be taking. And again, we really don't need more Earth. Thanks to the K9 archetype, we actually have access to plenty of Earth monsters. You've got Izana, Lupus, Naroi, and of course the new Holly Sue is also Earth. It's funny, back when Fenrir was at 2, you would see it in Vanquish Soul quite a bit, because first wave Vanquish Soul in Master Duel actually had a little bit of trouble getting Earth. You would even consider playing Vanquish Soul Pantera to have more Earth attribute cards, or a lot of the time Vanquish Soul would be playing Ghost Bell in metas where not necessarily a lot of other decks are, again just to have more Earth attributes. So 3 Fenrir, like a year ago, would have been phenomenal for Vanquish Soul. But again, nowadays with the Holly Sue and the K9 cards, what we're really missing a lot more often is that fire attribute. In fact, if you look at this example list in particular, it's really just the Raisins, the Xiaolongs, and the Ash Blossoms for fire attribute. And that's why you've been seeing in a lot of K9 Vanquish Soul builds the red layer if I can find it, here it is, the Super Quantum Red layer, or even more recently, the RB Vulcan Rocket. Both are level 5 fire attribute monsters that can special summon themselves from the hand. So not only do they help with the Vanquish Soul needing the fire attribute, but also, again, importantly, they are level 5, meaning they can go into rank 5s, which is kind of another point against Fenrir in a deck like this, is that it's level 7. And it doesn't really jive very well with the K9 cards as a result. Now, again, you could make the argument of, oh, you just special summon Fenrir, and it itself can act as a piece of your board, right? Either, again, going first as an end board piece, or going second, helping to break the opponent's board. You don't necessarily need to make a rank 5 with it. And while that is very much true, and definitely a huge point for Fenrir, again, not just in this deck, but in any deck, at the same time, not being able to really make use of the body is rough. The only extract monster that Fenrir can make, besides, like Typhon, would be like the Saryuya Skull Dread. And to be fair, Fenrir helping to make the Skull Dread, you would want to make Skull Dread in a lot of situations where you have Fenrir and not other cards, right? So it is helpful there, but it's like, is that worth cutting out against so many fire monsters? I think not. I personally don't really think that 3 Fenrir is going to catch on in K9 Vanquish Soul. You'll see a lot of people try it when the ban list comes into effect, but I think having these fire bodies that are actually level 5 ends up being way better for the deck, in my opinion. I'm not an expert though on K9 VS, so I could be wrong about that, but that's my take for trying to use Fenrir in a tier 1 deck. But there is one last deck that I'm actually really excited to rock a playset of Fenrir in, and it is Spright. Might sound really counterintuitive. Lex, you just got done talking about how Fenrir being level 7 was such a problem for K9. What about Spright? This thing isn't level 2. And while that is true, the thing about Spright, of course, is that it doesn't need 2 level 2 monsters. A lot of the time, it needs any 2 monsters, and only one of them needs to be level 2. So Fenrir plus literally any level 2 monster, even if you just open like Ronin Totem or hell, even Max C, you can link them into Sprend. Sprend dumps Angler, summons out 2 Nimble Beaver, and look at that. Now you got a full Spright combo off of Fenrir plus any level 2 monster. But I started thinking, you could even set it up further to have Fenrir plus any monster equal full Spright combo, regardless of if it's level 2. And we can do that by introducing the Fiendsmith engine. Of course, you can use Fenrir plus any monster to go into Moon of the Closed Heaven. That in turn will then let you go through the Fiendsmith line, and then you can use the Fiendsmith sequence plus any other monster to make Sprend, and that's full Spright combo. So that also kind of got me thinking about Fenrir and Fiendsmith's interaction, and that actually is a pretty solid argument for using Fenrir as an engine, is actually the Fiendsmith engine. As long as Moon of the Closed Heaven is legal, any 2 bodies going into a Fiendsmith line will matter for a certain number of decks, especially if those decks are able to pivot Fiendsmith into another combo line, like Yummy or Mitsurugi or Snake Eye or something like that. Then those decks would really want to have Fenrir, a monster that can special summon itself, is really solid going first or second, and of course can help make the Moon of the Closed Heaven. So this is actually, I think, one of the bigger points that I haven't really seen a lot of people talking about, is the interaction that way between Fiendsmith and Fenrir. Again, particularly through Moon of the Closed Heaven. Which really, if you're going to argue about the legality of cards and what's, making things a little bit too strong here, I would definitely argue far more against Moon than KASHTIRA FENRIR. I mean, that's a pretty ice-cold take, right? That Moon of the Closed Heaven makes Fiendsmith a little bit too easy to pivot into, and could very easily be ban-worthy as a result. However, I actually don't think in the current meta the Fiendsmith engine is really that problematic, so I don't currently have an issue with it, but I could very easily see it becoming a problem. I don't fault anybody for wanting Moon banned or even inherently disagree with it. But yeah, like I said, I think KASHTIRA FENRIR acting as an extender for the Fiendsmith engine or any Link-based deck really is worth looking at, as long as the Link monsters are fine with somewhat generic materials, right? You couldn't do this in like Radiant Typhoon, for example, where Varun needs 2 Radiant Typhoon monsters, unlike the Spright cards, which are 2 monsters, only one of which needs to be level, rank, or link 2. So just definitely some food for thought as far as Fenrir goes there. But yeah, those are the 4 lists that I really wanted to talk about that have been kind of theory crafting, cooking up in the kitchen, thinking about Fenrir being at 3 and what decks I would actually want to play it in. So hopefully you found this video helpful. I had a ton of fun building these decks, as I love deck building. I actually sometimes love it even more than just actually playing the game. But if you want to see more videos of me just like going over Theorycraft lists like this, definitely let me know in the comments below, and I'm definitely open to doing this more in the future. But I think for the time being, that's about all we have to cover. So once again, huge shout out to our YouTube members and Patreon subscribers. Definitely thanks to you as well for watching all the way to the end of the video. That's definitely one of the best ways that you can support smaller YouTube channels like my own. But we are going to move on now to our outro, where we are going to thank our YouTube members and Patreon subscribers. Hey everybody, Hexlex here. Thank you so very much for watching all the way to the very end of the video, which by the way is one of the best ways to support the channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, take a look at the names on screen. These are folks who have been so generous as to either join as a YouTube member or subscribe over on patreon.com/Hexlex to support. There's also perks for doing so. If you would like to see YouTube videos early, as well as some exclusive videos that get uploaded to YouTube, but for one reason or another I decide not to publish, definitely go ahead and hit that join button to see content early, as well as some exclusive content. If you're looking for more exclusive content, over on patreon.com, I upload exclusive videos that are not posted on YouTube just about every single day. Whether you choose to subscribe over on Patreon, join as a YouTube member, or simply continue to watch, your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so very much. But for now, this is Hexlex. I am signing out, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.